This is a webinar on Is Your Digital Strategy Killing You? And today we're hosting this two-part session. It's going to look and feel a lot different than your typical webinar. We're going to be making some big claims. We're going to be helping you rethink the way you communicate your value, maybe even rewrite your value prop, literally. But why are we here today? Why are we doing this? Why are you here? Why are we on this call? Well, Marc, Jimmy, and I got together a few weeks ago, and we were frankly galvanized by what's happening in the industry right now, and we wanted to help. So on our prep call, Marc was saying that when a good realtor walks into a cocktail party, people should toast instead of heading to the other corner of the room. And as we've seen in the media over the last few months, I think there's a lack of understanding about this industry, what this industry does. And the three of us have been in the industry for quite some time. We love this industry. We respect this industry. And so for today, the agenda is going to look a lot different. We're going to escape the real estate echo chamber. We're going to have some unfiltered conversations, because what got us to this moment clearly is not what is going to take us forward. So we'll be discussing how agents, teams, brokerages should be thinking about marketing and branding. We'll be taking a critical look at some marketing pillars, if you will, like IDX websites, social media, how to generate listing leads. But we're not just going to be talking about these topics. We're actually going to be digging into some real life examples. I would encourage you to throw some of your collateral in there, because in the second half of this presentation, we're going to dive into that. So let's move on to introductions real quick, because I don't think there's a combination of people I could think of who are more qualified on these subjects. Jimmy Mackin co-founded Curator in 2013, about the same time that I co-founded Real Scout. And today, Curator serves many of the top teams and agents across the country with digital marketing and lead gen. He's also a speaker for Tom Ferry, recently co-founded listinglead.com with Tom. And Marc Davison, also a longtime friend, co-founded 1000 Watt, which is widely regarded as the #1 real estate branding firm in the industry. He's been behind some of the most iconic brands, rebrands, repositioning of brands, everything from Berkshire Hathaway to Real, Louder and Bloom, Jack Conway, Dot Loop. He's one of the most respected people in real estate and someone who isn't afraid to stir the pot. So I'm your moderator, Andrew Flachner. I co-founded Real Scout. We help over 100,000 agents generate more deals from their existing CRM or database. And with that, I want to walk through the agenda for today's webinar. So we're experimenting with a new format. You probably haven't seen it before. For the next 45 minutes, we're going to be shining light on the ways the industry has lost its way in communicating its value, and why you should be focusing on something that Marc refers to as the final payoff. So we'll get into that. And then in about 45 minutes, we'll wrap the first part of this webinar and reconvene at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, where Jimmy and Marc are going to dissect and rebuild your marketing right before your eyes. So if you're interested in submitting your website URL, a link to a campaign you're running, display ads, whatever it may be, your logo, as Marc said, please go ahead and submit that in the chat box once we get that up and running. Again, we'll be engaging in a live marketing workshop at 1 p.m. Using the examples that you provide. So whether we're workshopping your marketing or someone else's, you're not going to want to miss that session. So come back and join us at 1 p.m. Jimmy, Marc, anything I missed before we open up the floor?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say, go ahead, Marc, please.
No, thank you, Jimmy. Just a couple of things. One, I'm painfully aware that there are others like us who are equally educated, skilled, and have a great voice in the categories of marketing and branding who are not part of our panel. And so I just want to acknowledge their absence, and we'll do our best to fill in the gap that they would fill in if they were here. And the only other thing I want to say is the three of us, we're longtime friends. I'm not sure your audience knows that, but we have had a long time friendship and respect for each other. We worked together. So I think we should do the audience a great service by not always agreeing with each other.
I don't think you've ever had a problem telling me if you think I'm wrong, Marc. So I will welcome that. You know, listen, I think, and it looks like the chat is working. I think the other thing I would add to what before Andrew kind of kicks us off here is, I think when I think about the stakes of where we're at as an industry, and I think about the advice that I'm seeing kind of permeate through the industry right now, it gives me kind of a moment to pause and reflect and realize that there are a lot of people in the industry who are incredibly smart people providing great advice. But then on the flip side, there are a lot of people with very big megaphones who are providing what I would consider to be objectively terrible advice. And
Yep.
and this is an industry right now where our hopes is, and I'll give you an example of this. Famously, the CEO and founder of uh, company that sells high-end furniture, Restoration Hardware. Thank you. I'm trying to remember it. So Restoration Hardware famously is a company that introduced for the first time the membership program. So I don't know what the price is these days, but it used to be maybe a couple $100 to join the Restoration Hardware membership. You can shop there, you get a discount. When they introduced that concept, they got skewered by Wall Street. Terrible idea. This is not going to work. And what the CEO came out and said, and it's really important for us to remember this, he says, when I look at the landscape today and I look at what all these other companies are doing, he goes, they are collectively agreeing to race to the bottom. And we at Restoration Hardware are deciding not to participate. And that stuck with me because I think right now, especially where fees and compensation is at the forefront of every conversation, we are in a race to the bottom where I'm seeing at a high level, I'm seeing agents talk about the 65 things they're going to do to help sell your property or help buy your property. And they're focused, they're so fixated on price. And when price becomes the main point of differentiation, the cheapest will always win. And so what we are hopefully we can do together as a group here in a way that's hopefully constructive and gives everyone some insight is we want to help you think about establishing your value proposition so people are willing to pay the premium that you're actually worth. And I think that is ultimately where this industry needs to go, is focusing in on the value, and as we'll talk about in a moment here, the final payoff versus how do we justify 2.5%. I think that framing of that, I think, just instantly puts you down a path where it leads you in one end state, if you will. So the stakes have never been higher. It's never been more important to get this right. And hopefully we can deliver value for everyone who's been a part of today's session with us.
I completely agree with that, Jimmy. You know, Andrew, you said something up front. What got us here might not get us there. I think we should proceed with the idea that maybe what got us here is exactly why we're here right now.
Yeah,
what we
absolutely.
haven't done, like Jimmy, to that point about the bad advice, there's a lot of bad advice, and we're not going to call out who is providing that. People can figure that out on their own. But like the lack of good advice, the race to the bottom, it's what got us here. And now we have to first uncover how we got here, what led to this. And Andrew, that was like the basis of our call like a month and a half ago on a Saturday. And then what do we do to repair that, to obliterate that so we can move forward?
Yeah, so I know we've teased this notion of a final payoff a couple times, and I do want to get to that because especially with the NAR settlement, I think there's a lot of talk about how to pitch one's value. And I've seen countless coaches and agents tout a list of tasks as their value prop, which is all types of problematic. And I know, Marc, you're going to have some strong feelings, and Jimmy, you might too. But, you know, Marc, why don't you open this up? What is the final payoff?
It's a term I guess I kind of coined. I don't know if it's a great term or not, but it articulates for me what it is I'm looking for internally from my creative team when we're working on a brand project and we're coming up with messaging and marketing. The final payoff is the ultimate reason why somebody would care about whatever it is you're communicating. There's a famous quote, and there were a million memes out there, and you can Google it. It was first represented by Professor Theodore Levitt, who was a business professor at Harvard. And his quote was something like, people don't buy a drill, they buy a hole. And he mentioned this in a business class. And the point of it is, don't sell the feature, the drill, sell the benefit, the hole. Who am I to argue with like a Harvard professor? However, if I had a chance to chat with him, I would say that the hole is not really the final payoff. People don't want holes in their house. The hole is a means to an even greater end. So when I had written about this publicly not that long ago, I referenced a birthday gift for my wife. And so this gift that I got her needed to be installed. So I had to go to Ace Hardware to buy a drill and a bit. And that's when I started thinking about Levitt's quote. I'm buying this massive size bit so I can bore a super large hole so I can install a ballet bar into the wall. So the hole wasn't the final payoff, the ballet bar was the final payoff. And if I were a drill company, rather than selling drills, I would sell the installation or the construction of things you do with a drill. But when I really, really thought about it, it wasn't even the ballet bar that was the final payoff. The reason for the ballet bar was so that she can have the most amazing workout ever and feel good about herself. And that is the internal conversation that you have as a marketer, is to figure out what you're marketing at what is the ultimate benefit or the ultimate payoff that would get somebody to really care and lock in, not just buy the product, but kind of lock into the brand, because the story you told is in fact their story. It's exactly why they bought something. So we don't buy bicycles so that we could road bike. We buy bicycles because we want to either enjoy the outside or become fit or train for a race. Like, it's the same holds true in real estate.
Yeah. And Mark, if I were to bring that back to real estate for a second, because this is something I think is really important. It's a great mental model when you're thinking about messaging and positioning. Mark, let's take a second if we could. And Andrew, I don't want to jump ahead here, but like I want to stay on the final payoff for a moment here. And let's take a traditional marketing piece, like a just sold campaign. And I want you to maybe juxtapose the way in which we market a just sold today and compare it to maybe how we might do it with this framework of thinking of the final payoff. So if I were to sort of characterize a typical just sold is going to be sold a house quickly. You sold it above ask price. We had a few offers. If you want to learn more about selling your house with me, give me a call back. And typically, both the design and the message on these campaigns is usually agent centric, the results they got, and of course, some type of call to action. Now, the spirit of this, I actually applaud. I like the fact that agents are making the effort to push themselves to say, you know what, I sold the house. Let me see if I can take this one sale and turn it into 2 sales. When you look at a just sold campaign, Mark, first, how would you characterize what I just broke down, the typical one? And then maybe you and I can take a moment here just to brainstorm how we might reframe that with the final payoff in mind.
Yeah. I think Jimmy, this is a great entree to what you and I are going to be doing in a couple of months when we're together in Dallas. So it's good practice. So when I look at just sold, it is the brand, the agent, the brand, announcing something that they did. It's important to them. It's a career milestone. Look at what I just sold and look at how much money I sold it for. The key to good marketing, the key to good branding, it's no secret. This is, and Andrew, you mentioned, let's look outside of real estate for like pathways, because I got my start outside of real estate working at a major agency that represented brands like Colgate, Palmolive. I learned how the world of marketing and branding works through that mentorship. Nobody cares, about your accolade. Nobody cares about what you did. People care about themselves. They're interested in me. So like, if you're just sold for $3 million or 30% over asking, kudos to you, hooray for you. I now move on because you haven't told me how that could benefit me. And therein lies the pathway to the final payoff. And I would say, don't get tricked up by the space or the platform of a postcard. Learn how we got 30% over asking and how that could impact you if you're thinking of selling, or even more, with more empathy, learn how that might impact you as a buyer. Now
Yeah.
you're creating a message that somebody would look at and go, yeah, I think I probably should pay more attention to this because this now impacts me.
Well, what are some other opportunities for this final payoff approach outside of, just sold and just listed?
I think it's anything that so there's two types of marketing. There's the one type that most, I'd say, is 99% of all real estate marketing, which is direct response, transactional marketing. You can recognize that marketing by the variety of calls to action. It's a message that wants you to go do something, learn more, buy now, get your ticket tonight, early bird, this, whatever. Like, uh, that is mostly all of the marketing that we do is direct response, or there's this sort of weird reality of like personal brand marketing, which is, oh, look at me, look how great I am, look what I'm doing. I'm here, I'm there, I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm having a good time. There's very little brand level marketing. So I think we can get to brand level marketing down the road, but I think all this transactional direct response marketing, every piece of it, and this is, guys, this is sort of the second half of this. Show us your stuff because we'll show you like the opportunities to, if we could just show you how to think through to get to a final payoff, I think we could teach everybody how to fish.
That's right. And if you're just joining us, a reminder that in the second half of this webinar, we're going to be dissecting, breaking down, rebuilding your marketing collateral. So feel free to throw your URL to your website or a link to any campaigns you're running, and we'll look through those during the break. And at 1 p.m. Pacific, we're going to come back and have that session. Jimmy,
Yeah,
do you have...
before we move on, Andrew, and I know we got more to cover here as we kind of set this up. Mark, what would you say to people who are doing just listed and just sold and they say, Mark, it works, I got listings from it? Because I think there is a percentage of people who are listening now who probably either are that agent or know of that agent, seems to dominate because they're doing the just listed, just sold. So who are we to say that's bad marketing if they have proof or evidence in their market someone else is actually doing it and as a result getting business?
That's a good question because we're not saying that that's bad marketing. All we're saying is it's not the most effective marketing because yeah, you're getting more listings. That's all you're getting though. Like we're at the moment in time where the need to create value is, so there are many, we could open up this can of worms here, but there are many issues that have led us here to this moment. And one of those issues is the lack of value proposition. And there's a lack of value proposition perceived when all the marketing that you're doing is basically sales and transactional based. If just listed, just sold, I'm listing, I'm selling, there's no value proposition there. You're just a utility. And you're going up against every other agent who, look, I'm on a mailing list. You guys are on, I am sure you guys are probably on as many, if not more, mailing lists than I am. So because every agent in my world has got me on their mailing list. So I see the identical, everybody's making the same claims. Everybody's listing and selling. No one's branding. But I think that there is, so the two things that we're going after is brand value, brand equity, value proposition. And the second one, which there's an agent, Amy Stockberger, who will be also representing her point of view and what she's built, which is like a real long-term loyal client for life. I think she did an event recently with Byron on BAM Media, or is soon coming up soon. I'm not really clear on exactly when that program was, but she's literally building a platform where clients, they are not going anywhere. They are sticking with her for the lifetime. And I think if you're just going for the sale and the transaction, that's okay. That's not bad, but why not go for better?
Yeah,
That's right. And I think just a more direct, contribution. I would just say, Jimmy, that if your marketing is working and you're wondering whether you should test new marketing, just test it, right? I mean, I think that, innovation, a big part of innovation is split testing and see if you can get better results. So if what you're doing is working today, great, but wouldn't it be great if it was working 20% better or 30% better? I do want to keep the conversation moving because we have a lot to
Yeah,
cover on the agenda.
a lot. Yep.
Marc, you've been hinting at brand marketing and value props a few times already, and I do want to get into the meat of that because I think a lot of agents and teams miss the mark when it comes to conveying their unique value proposition. And I think there's nowhere that's more pronounced than on an agent website. So perhaps these two conversations can flow nicely into each other. But Marc, do you want to just set the stage on the brand marketing piece?
Um, can you be can you be a little more specific? Because
Yeah,
I
I
don't want
think
to go
that,
all over the
listen,
place.
especially in the wake of the NAR settlement, a lot of people are thinking about how to convey their value proposition. And when I go to an agent's website, frankly, they all look the same to me, right? There's a big search bar that no one will ever use in most cases. There's nothing that really sets the agent apart. There's certainly no mention of the final payoff. And so, what would be your advice to an agent or a team that's thinking about how to better communicate their value?
Okay. Uh, I'm going to come at this. I'm going to come at this a little differently than I did when you and I spoke, but I'm going to get right to the point. Um, if I were to ask you to define what being a human being is, one might say, well, the thing that makes us human is our soul. And I would say, yeah, okay, we have a soul, and maybe other creatures don't have a soul. We don't know that for sure. But is that all there is? There must be more that makes us human. We smile, we laugh, we tell jokes, we cry, we feel pain, we feel emotion. We also have arms and legs, and there are a million things that actually define what being a human is. There's no one thing. There's no one thing that defines a value proposition. The value proposition is the sum total of everything that you have firing within the DNA of your brand. It's everything. It's mission, vision, purpose, promise. It's the essence of your brand. It's the positioning of your brand. It's actually also expressed through the identity and the way you represent, the way you act and behave. It's all together makes up your value proposition. And when you have a value proposition, it should be the first thing you lead with. Like you lead with it. Maybe you lead with it as a tagline in your brand name, or you lead with it as in a campaign slogan or just a company mantra. Or if you have a website, you would lead with it in the top section of your website. Here's our value proposition. You've landed here. Here's what you're going to get from us that's different from everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, with that in mind, 99%, maybe more, if there's more, 100% of every agent, broker, real estate entity website in real estate begins their website with an IDX search box, which basically is their value proposition, a buyer search. How can that? So first off, if you're all trying to build brands, how do you build a brand and not present your value proposition as your very first thing? Unless, of course, a buyer lead generator search for homes is your value proposition. But if it's not your value proposition, A, it doesn't belong there. B, it doesn't differentiate you from anybody else. So you're just like anybody else. And C, you're basically saying, I don't know what my value is. I don't know what you need. So I'm just giving you this thing because maybe in my mind, I'm solving a problem that you don't have. So like that, and Andrew, I told you this, since 2010, I've been on a bandwagon of rallying against IDX as the opening segment, to an audience of none, like no one's listening. But maybe this is the moment now where, like my point earlier, what you've been doing got you here is why you're here. If you're not presenting what you're worth, what your value is, what your differentiation is in the world on a website where people are going and giving them something of benefit to do on your website that's uniquely you have no value proposition. That impacts your fee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll stop
There's
there.
well, Marc, let
Jimmy, what am I
me
missing?
Well, I think, well, let's give a tangible example of someone doing it well. I'll give you my take and you tell me if you agree or disagree, which is we oftentimes look at companies in real estate and we sort of demonize them very quickly without maybe appreciating how well they are or how good they are at marketing. And to my knowledge, I think that Open Door is a company that has done a fantastic job at communicating their value proposition to consumers to the
100%.
point, right? To the point where Open Door, what does Open Door sell? They sell certainly speed, they sell certainty, and I think in some respects maybe convenience, right, as a big part of what they're doing. So and I think the reason people go to Open Door is because of those sort of three things. And so there, if you look at their, and the reason I bring this up is because you can deliver, you can claim the same things Open Door claims, but the reality is it's not believable. And the reason it's not believable is because every other agent is going to say the same thing. So the unfortunate reality is sometimes your real value proposition, if it's being, let's say, weaponized against you because all of your competition is using it, then you have to find new and creative ways to rise above it. And so Open Door, in my opinion, would be a fantastic example of a very clear and compelling value proposition. And here's what's interesting about this. Open Door put this in their earnings statement recently, one of their investor letters. And what they were testing was they're testing what was the price sensitivity for people using Open Door. And so they were charging 6% commission to use Open Door. And this blew people away. People were like, oh, don't pay a realtor. They're super expensive. I mean, Andrew, there's a Reddit thread that has this. And hopefully the team can find it, which is there's a Reddit thread that goes, someone's like, hey, I want to hire an agent, but they're really expensive. And this person goes, oh, don't use an agent, use Open Door. Open Door charges as much money, if not more, than an agent. And so they've done such a good job of positioning it as an alternative to real estate agents that consumers think it's actually less expensive when it's actually, in many cases, more. So Open Door tested this. And what they found was that they were only losing about 1/3 of their customers when they went from 6% fees all the way up to 10% on a transaction. And so if your value proposition is so damn good that consumers are willing to pay 10% of the actual dollar value of the home, like we should look at that and say, oh, that's the impact of having a great value proposition. You no longer are competing on price. So Marc, when you look at companies like in the prop tech space, Open Door being one of them, is there anyone else that you look at and say, man, not necessarily that's going to be our value proposition, but they got it right. A company actually did it really well.
Well, I'm going to answer that. But Andrew, is there a way that I can share my screen for a second?
Yeah, you should be able to. If not, just send me the link and I can share it.
And I swear to you, Jimmy and I and Andrew did not work this out in advance. But this is how in sync we are. As
Marc,
an exercise,
everyone knows that we don't do anything in advance. so that's not a favor.
yes, completely uncalculated. I developed this quick thing for a workshop for a client last week because I wanted to show them, again, teaching people to fish is really important. So I created what I call the positioning statement that builds value proposition. That also plays into what I call the final payoff. So I wrote this, I can't tell what Open Door's positioning statement is because positioning statements tend to be internal. So they're not public, but you can reverse engineer what their positioning might be by looking at their public messaging. So what I wrote is Open Door is an online brokerage for people who want to sell quickly by offering all cash offers within 24 hours so people can sell without a hassle and know exactly how much they have to buy their next home. That's really the payoff. Because we know right now people are afraid to list because they don't know what they're going to be able to buy. And then you look at the way they position that value proposition, list your home with an offer in hand. This is kind of like, it shows you the internal matrix of how outbound messaging is created by developing an internal like messaging, marketing, and brand strategy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So
So,
Just super
yeah,
quick
go
here,
ahead.
that
uh,
Mark knows I don't think in kind of formulas here, but if you just picked up on what Mark had, it's who we are, for who, like for who, what's the desired outcome that, yeah, you want to pull it back up for me? Like there's actually a little bit of like, this is like who we are. We are an online brokerage. Who are we for people who want to sell quickly? Like, what is the outcome they're going to achieve? They're going to achieve basically selling within 24 hours. And the final payoff is kind of towards the end of that without the hassle, knowing exactly how much they're going to get. And so what we're implying in that, what Mark's implying in that statement is you're removing all of the uncertainty that comes along with selling your house. So if you don't want to sell your house quickly and you want to get the top dollar and you're willing to kind of experience some pain, we're probably not the right fit for you as an example. And so that kind of like my mind immediately goes to how do we replicate that in a way? And obviously writing good copy, creativity is a process. Having a formula is a good starting point. Great copy obviously comes through just iteration. So I really think that's a good framing here. Mark, what do you have pulled up now?
no, what I just, I broke down what you just orated, which is, a detailed description of who you are, a detailed description of your category, like exactly what you said. But I think a good exercise for listeners is copy this and build two or three of these around your competitor based on what I just did, because I don't know what Open Door's positioning statement is. I just created it. I reversed engineered it from their outward facing marketing. So build this based upon what you know your competitor is based on how they are representing in the marketplace. Once you've done two or three of your competitors, now do this for you. And you're going to start to realize that like the way you detail, like for example, if you're a boutique real estate company and your competitor is a boutique real estate company and you describe them as so-and-so is a local boutique real estate brokerage, well, then that automatically says you can't position yourself that way. You have to find another more deeper, better way to detail who you are. And this is an exercise. Sure, it's done by brand strategists and marketing strategists, but it's a worksheet and you should give it a shot and give it a try and see what you come up with. If nothing else, it'll make you think about your competitor, make you study your competitor a little more closely, and it'll force you to start to write and position where you sit in the world. And what you'll realize coming out of this is like, yeah, maybe leading with IDX doesn't really support any of the things we're saying, any of the problems our targeted customers have, and provides no final payoff to why they're even on my website.
Well, I think if you can apply this formula to your business and your brand, the next question becomes, well, where is the expression of that deliverable? And I think the website is a great focal point, just because a lot of people are going to Google you and they're considering you to list their home, for instance. And just to drive the point home on the IDX conversation, do you as a consumer use your IDX product? Right? Do you as a consumer, when you're looking for a home, do you have the Zillow app on your phone, or are you eating your own dog food, as they say in Silicon Valley? Are you using your own technology? Because if you're not using it, why would your consumers or prospects use it? I also just want to call on some research from 1000 Watt, actually. The question that 1000 Watt asked consumers is, what is the primary reason you have a personal website with IDX home search? 35% of respondents said that they want their clients to search for homes on their site. That's a nice thing to want. But again, the question is, would they use it? The second question, or the second response, was 1 in 4 people actually responded saying, I don't actually have a defined purpose or strategy by having IDX. So that just goes to show you that a lot of people are spending money and investing in a strategy that they don't quite understand. But what this does is, not only is it not accretive for your brand and for your marketing, it actually takes away from it, because everything that Marc and Jimmy just talked about, what sets you apart, which draws attention, you are now deprioritizing that. And when you go to an agent's website, you just don't see that unique value coming through. You see something that literally every other agent on the market has, which is an IDX.
Yeah.
You know,
There's some really good on this too. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
no, you take it.
So, well, there's interesting data on this. I think when I look at brands like Redfin as an example, Redfin's original sin is they offered a superior technology product. They had great user experience. They were early to adopt technology, but their original sin was they wanted to be a discount brokerage because they told themselves a story that, this is what the consumer ultimately wants. And there's a reason why, after spending billions of dollars on advertising and marketing and being in business now for whatever, 12, 13 years, they've only gotten 2% of market share. I mean, that they should be dominant at this stage. But I think many of the investors feel that way. Like, why aren't you more successful? And I was on an earnings call recently, listening to Rich Barton talk through Zillow's strategy. And one of the things he called out, and he said this in the call, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but this is going to give you a general sense of where they're at. About 1/3, 33% of the people who actually schedule a showing on Zillow's website or apps or products goes on to transact. And of that 1/3, only 3% use a Zillow Flex agent. And so he was communicating to investors that, hey, listen, we want to drive that number from 3 to 5%, right? So 97% of people don't use a Zillow agent or Zillow connection. He wants to get that number up because of the volume or the transaction volume being, quite accretive for them. So what does that tell us? It tells us that you cannot draw a direct connection between someone searching for homes and wanting to hire you. If Zillow, the word Zillow is searched more than the word real estate. If Zillow hasn't figured out how to get 80% of the people searching on their website to use a recommended referred agent, then how the hell do we think we're going to be able to do that? Which tells us that, and I'm not going to say IDX is a scapegoat here. I think IDX is a simple, undifferentiated utility. It can be useful in certain contexts. It can be a tool in the toolbox. But unfortunately, I think what our position on this is that it's the only tool that agents are using, and they set themselves up for failure. Because if it worked, no agent would ever leave their IDX provider. I think that's just the reality. But it's a revolving door. So I would say search is, as we all know, kind of the beginning, not the end of the journey, but there's no evidence whatsoever that someone searching on your website is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to use you to transact. I mean, the story has already been told on this. The question then becomes, okay, what will? If not that, then what? And I think that's the challenge we have as marketers is trying to answer then the what question there, Mark.
It's also the challenge we have as branders, because there has been a absolute rise in attention and focus in building brand. The mistake, and Andrew, I alluded to this morning, the grave mistake that we've all made is we leaned into this anomaly called personal branding. And we could tackle that reality at some point if we want to today, but like that hasn't worked out all too well for anybody in the grand schema. The world doesn't really find itself connecting or showing affinity to the realtor brand. Yeah, I have a realtor I love, but I love the realtor. I don't know what the brand, there's no brand there. But this is a branding effort, because if you're trying to build a brand and you're building a brand around this generic utility that does serve a purpose, but it's certainly not the thing you should be leading with, then there's no brand juice coming out of your destination. So it gets to the bigger question, and I'm going to reverse engineer my role because I'm not really a great interviewer, but I'm going to throw a question out because Jimmy, you've kind of figured this out. Is that because so many people are like, well, if I take the IDX off, then what? Well, what do I do? Well, okay, that's a great problem to have to figure out, if I'm not going to use the thing that doesn't really work for me and it's not supporting me and it's likely killing any effort I'm trying to, exercise in creating brand mojo, then what do I do? Well, so, Jimmy, years ago, you kind of figured out that there's two kinds of agents in the world. There's agents who represent buyers and agents who represent sellers. And you began to distinguish the audience based upon you know, primary audiences and primary services. And so you said, you know what, as a company, we're going to focus on agents who represent sellers. And you began to build a strategy for sellers on how to get more on agents who represent sellers on how to get more sellers. But I think in the mix of what you were doing, you were beginning to brand listing agents as listing agents. To where, like, not a personal brand. I'm not like Marc Davison, this happy-go-lucky dude that's lives whatever and does this and has these hobbies. No, I'm a serious mofo that lists properties and sell properties and gets the job done. So you began to build websites. I'm not here to promote your product, but like, I'm here to show strategy. You built products that centralized all of the agents' messaging and branding around one thing and one thing only, being the listing giant in the marketplace. How did that work out? Jimmy just froze at the absolute worst time.
I'll tell you what the benefit. Hold on, am I back now? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're back. So wait, let me lead it back in, Jimmy. So because
I got you. I heard it. I heard it.
Okay.
There is the benefit when you are clear on who you are. The benefit is you get to say no to a lot of things. And I think, there's a great quote by Bill Gurley, who is a famous venture capitalist and investors in all the companies you would think of, Uber being one of them. He said, startups do not die of starvation, they die of indigestion. And I think this represents maybe the challenge we have in our industry, is that when you are not willing to draw the lines of kind of demarcation in terms of here's who we serve, here's what we do, here's our value proposition, here's our point of view, here's our worldview, right? When you're not willing to do that because you're afraid of losing customers, you never get to attract the right ones. And so what I think is really interesting about this, and I think the lesson is, one of my favorite examples, and I kind of, if I got like a Mount Rushmore, Mark, of people I put up on like in terms of brands that are doing this well, is a company called Basecamp, looking outside the real estate industry.
Yep.
And so I've known Jason Fried and DHH for a while. I met Jason at an event many years ago, and I'm certainly a fan of his, and I consider them to be, a mentor from afar because they run a bootstrap business like we do. And one of the things they do, and I love it, and I mean I love it, is they have an enemy in their marketing and their messaging. And so they're really clear about the enemy. And so whether it's, let's say like their latest product, Hey, which is an email marketing solution, it's a replacement for Gmail. They Gmail and kind of ad-based, generic email tools is the enemy. People that sell your information is the enemy. They have a new product called Once, which is like, instead of buying software every month, you should just pay for it once. And like, so the enemy is like recurring revenue software businesses that have, exuberant fees. So what they do, and everyone should check out, by the way, everyone should check out the website once.com. What they do is they have this sort of like, Mark, you would probably describe it as a worldview, right? I may describe it as a point of view, but they clearly articulate why they do what it is they do. And so what I think, if you're a listing agent, it's not about the what you do. Of course that matters. What I want to know as a potential seller is explain to me why you do what you do. And if you can, and all of a sudden you start to, I think the clarity in the value proposition begins to emerge when you really explain the why behind the what. And I think when we condense the what, like we try to stack the average, to stack the mediocrity. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, is if we can just say to ourselves, why do we do the things we do? Oftentimes it's in service of the customers. Well, how have we communicated that? And so companies like Once, I mean, Basecamp does a fantastic job of that. So I think there's two things, Mark, that to answer your question directly. The benefit for us is it has allowed us to focus a lot more clearly on who we serve and why we serve them and what the outcome is. Number two, we have a more clear worldview. I mean, we just like understand, hey, this, and I'm not saying being a buyer's agent is a bad thing. All I'm saying is I think it's better to be a listing agent. You may completely disagree with me. You may think this guy's full of shit. It doesn't make a difference. Like, this is what we believe. We believe it's better to be a listing agent. And here's all the reasons why we believe that. So our mission is we want to help listing agents get more listings. And like that's why we exist in the world. And so I think what I would be saying is, and Marc, maybe you can expand on this. I know we're going to wrap here in a second before we actually do the work. Like maybe you can explain a little bit, because you educated me on this and it really helped me think differently about how I market. If you can maybe spend just a few minutes talking about worldview and help everyone who's tuning in right now to understand this, because I think this, of all the tools we have in the branding and marketing toolbox, I think this one may be one of the more practical ones that you use the most often.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. And just to add to your answer, what you've also built and established for the agents who subscribe to that is they are now branding themselves around something more viable and real to them. It's their value proposition. I'm a great selling agent. Beforehand, they were leading with a buyer lead generator called IDX. It was completely opposite of what they were even good at. And it resulted in a lot of added new business listings they might never would have gotten. Literally, they never would have gotten those listings had they not gone that route. So when you do work, the kind of work that I do, which is build brands from the inside first and then outside, you need certain ingredients. You know, you can't bake bread without a list of ingredients, but like without flour, there's nothing. So what is the flour? It's the worldview. You use the term worldview. Simon Sinek referred to it as the why, but he, like Professor Levitt, kind of boiled things down almost too simply to where they left some things out. So while it's important to know your why, no one really cares about your why until you fulfill it with so that you can. Like, what good is my belief system or my why if it's just my why and it has no payoff? But back to the final payoff, you need the so that you can blank. So like the reason why you're so vested in helping agents get more listings is because of a belief system that you have around putting sellers in direct contact with the best listing agents in the market. It creates a better experience for everybody. It gives the agent more value. Like there's a so that you can blank. There's a payoff. So the worldview is essentially a construct of the villain or the problem that it currently exists. Before you developed your product, before you were around, there was this problem or villain in the world, and that you recognized it. So the worldview begins with your recognition of the problem. And as a result of what your solution is to fix the problem, you then need to describe the better world that now exists as a result of your idea. That, and I can probably share my screen again at some point and show examples of like better world. I as just a hobby, I build worldview statements just by reverse engineer. I mean, when you do something that you love, you practice it. I love doing this, so I continually like put myself in front of a brand and go, based upon their outbound messaging, I wonder what their worldview is. So I write one, and I have a list of hundreds of them that I share with my company.
I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how that conversation plays into the next part of the webinar, because we are a bit over time, and I want to make sure that we have time to review and dissect all this marketing collateral so that when
it goes too fast.
Yeah, it goes too fast. And this has been a really great conversation. But what Marc and Jimmy are talking about here, the final payoff and reframing your value prop, rethinking your digital first impression, that's the way to stand out in a crowded marketplace. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see where the rubber hits the road. Again, we haven't seen a webinar being done quite like this in the past, but at 1 p.m. Pacific on the same exact Zoom channel. So just keep it open, just, keep it open on your computer, get back to your emails, get back to writing offers, but join us at 1 p.m. Pacific because we are going to review your marketing collateral and talk about how to incorporate the worldview, how to incorporate a value prop that really makes sense. And so if you haven't done it already, please submit your website URL into the chat box, any marketing collateral you want to link to, et cetera. Even if we don't have a chance to cover your marketing, I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how we can take this more academic framework that you saw earlier, this formula, and apply it to a real estate website or a real estate logo, value prop, et cetera. And yes, this webinar will be recorded and we will send it out afterwards. But certainly if you're submitting your marketing collateral, you definitely want to be here in case we get to yours. Any final words to just take us home, and then we'll pause the webinar and see everyone in a couple hours.
Well, one thing to add there is what we will do is we'll take an example of something that everybody could be using in their market. So I think like whether just listed, just sold card is a great example of this. It is like something that's a very common, repeatable kind of task you have. That's part of your kind of marketing checklist every month. We can look at something like that. I will say the last thing before we jump, because I do want to talk about the webinar coming up here. Our hope is, when you get this right, and it's important to take note of this. When you get this right, there is no limit to how far you can grow your business. Because when I look at an example of, we're all familiar with Stanley, the thermos company, and you look at that brand's been around for 105+ years. Marc, I can't think of let me give you some perspective. I'm in a Jacksonville right now, a Tom Ferry event. Just gave a presentation to a couple hundred realtors here. Let me give you some data on this. Stanley's been around for over 100 years. In 2019, they did $75 million in revenue. Last year, they did just shy of 800 million. They'll probably do $1 billion this year. So I can't think of any other brand that's been around 100 years where in year 105 to 110, they 10x the business. And what they did is they got their positioning, their marketing, their messaging, they got it right. And so this stuff is just short of magic when you get it right. And especially in a world where we got 1.5 million realtors all doing the same thing, all clamoring over their different value propositions, our ability to get this right, this is the final payoff, right? This is really where you go with this. So I think my excitement around this and why this has been something I've been very passionate about, something that I think all three of us share, is the impact of this isn't just a 5% gain in performance. It's something that could truly transform your business. So yeah, we're excited to see you at 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern, like I'm on the East Coast here, and we're going to do some work.